Hey everyone, my name's Alan Jackson. I work at JGL Livestock at JGL Group of Companies. I've been with JGL since 2004. I've been a buyer since 2006. I live in Prince Albert, Saskatchewan. Also run a grazing operation up there with my wife and two kids. I've been doing this presentation at Professor Roy's cattle and grain marketing class for about 4 or 5 years. I've always enjoyed coming to the classroom and seeing all the young faces. Fortunately, can't do it this year, and this is an incredibly awkward situation for me, so please bear with me. And I look forward to being back next year in person, hopefully. So, want to talk to you guys about the cattle business, cattle buying, cattle marketing, and basically what my day-to-day duties include. Back in the old days, buying cattle was pretty simple. You went to the auction markets, you bought cattle that you were told to buy for the price you were told to buy them for. That's still the same today. However, some duties have changed. Buying cattle is a small part of what we do on a day-to-day operation. We do lots of consulting, risk management. We feed cattle ourselves, graze cattle ourselves, and there's more to just going to the sale ring and buying them, and that's kind of what we're going to talk a little bit about today. But first, we're going to talk about the different methods of buying and selling cattle and different avenues you can take to procure that livestock or sell that livestock. Anyone who's in the cattle industry, you've definitely heard of a live auction. You've probably been to one. They're the most popular way to market cattle, and the first way everyone thinks about when they think about marketing cattle. There's a couple different methods to do a live auction. There's a pre-sort sale where producers will take similar cattle from several different producers and mix them together and sell them as one big lot. That's called a pre-sort sale. Those sales, you generally, you can pump 2,000 or 3,000 head through in 2 or 3 hours. It's a very quick, efficient way of buying cattle. It drums up a lot of interest because they advertise before the sale and there's big groups of cattle. 100, 200 head lots of cattle gain a lot of attention from the feeders in Alberta, Ontario, the US, and that's what they're all looking at. It's a good way to market cattle. The old way of doing it, and there's not very many of them around anymore, there is still a few places that do a regular sale, is where cattle are sold by owner, and usually 1, 2, 3 at a time, unless they can put a big group of them together. It's a slow way of selling and buying cattle. We had regular sales back in the day where you would regularly sit there till midnight, sometimes 2, 3 in the morning, buying cattle 1, 2 at a time. It could get pretty painful. You saw some huge market swings in the regular sales because you can't have 3 or 4 guys in the front row being fully competitive for that long. You're going to see some dips in the market and some rises in the market. Pros and cons of live auctions. The pros, there's no doubt about it. Some of the highest prices that you see and hear about in the cattle business generally come from live auctions. You might have a group of cattle that a guy needs to fill a pen, and so does another guy, and they hammer away on each other, and cattle bring crazy prices. You definitely see some big hot prices in the market. Cons to it, it's usually the first place to feel a downtrend in the market when the futures crash, or if the dollar goes up a lot, or if there's bad weather is definitely the worst when you're at a live auction. If you get a big snowstorm in Feedlot Alley in southern Alberta, you can see cattle drop $50 a head easy in a market like that. And the bad part is when you take those cattle to that sale, they're there. You can say you want to no sale the cattle and take them home, but that's going to cost you a fortune too. So the one downside is that once they're there, and you never really know what you're getting until they go through the ring. However, like I said, you can see some huge price jumps up in the live auction as well. A couple other methods of marketing cattle is internet sales. They've really gained a lot of ground in business in the last, I would say, 10 years. They've probably been around for, 15, 20 years. Basically what happens is a representative from the internet auction company will come to your farm, do assessment of your cattle, write a description, and describe to the buyers the breed, the weight, estimated weight, and quality of your cattle, take pictures and video of them, and put it up on the internet sale, and it's literally you clicking a mouse, bidding against other buyers from all over Canada against bidding on these cattle. It's cost effective. There is a cost to it. It's not quite as much as going through the sale ring. You don't have to pay freight to bring them to town. They're sold on your yard, so you don't pay any trucking. There's a lot less stress for the animals. They're not going through the auction market where somewhere they got to stay there for a day or 2 days even before they're even sold. They're at home. They're in their pen, in their environment, and it's you know, you get the same ups as you have in a live auction, and the really good pro to it is if the market is bad and you're not happy with the way your cattle sold that day, you just pass them out, which means you say no sale, and whatever they brought, if you weren't happy with it, you say, you know what, we're going to try again next week, or maybe I'll keep them, or try a different way of selling them. But if you're not happy with what they bring on that day, they stay at your farm, no harm done, you still keep your cattle. Another method of marketing cattle is direct sales, and there's a few different ways to do it. Sealed bid is where you, the producer or owner of the cattle, will call 3 or 4 different cattle buyers in your area. They come out and look at your cattle. They agree on you agree with them on a base weight, what the cattle should weigh, and they all submit a price to you. And let's say it's at noon today is when you accept bids. Everyone has their bids in by noon, and the highest bidder gets the cattle. There's usually no commissions are charged to the producer when this is done. The buyers are just going to buy the cattle, and they're not going to charge the producer for buying their cattle off the farm. They make their money when they sell the cattle. Private treaty is another method. That's essentially where you as a producer deal with a buyer and negotiate a price together, usually over a cup of coffee at the kitchen table. It's a method where you, the producer, are fully in control and you're very interactive, whereas the other methods, you're taking them to an auction company, they're doing the marketing for you, and you basically sit back and wait for your check to come. In this method, you are fully involved in the negotiation of marketing your cattle. Definitely want to make sure you know who you're dealing with when you're dealing with private treaty, and it's one of those things that you just build trust over time and build relationships with people over time, and to do that private treaty dealing. Another method is feedlot direct. If you have a local feedlot in your area that you deal with, you call the feedlot, they give you a price, you take them to the feedlot, they weigh them on their scale, done deal. Usually no charges there either. It's always good to get a second or maybe a third opinion, but if you got a guy close and you trust him and he treats you right, it's a very effective way of marketing your cattle. There's not much cost and very low stress on the animals. They go from point A to point B, and there's no stops in the middle or anything like that. Buying stations, there's a few in the province. We at JGL have 2 in the province. We have 1 in Alberta. Essentially, if in the past, if you had 20 head of cattle, well, it's not a load. They're probably steers and heifers, cattle that would generally go to an auction, and those guys didn't have the option to sell direct. At a weigh station, what happens is the cattle are brought to the weigh station. You're usually given an idea of what your cattle are worth before they show up, and they get sorted and weighed and put in pens where they belong with cattle of similar weight and breed and quality. And you can take 20 head in, and at that buying station, they might have 200 head that day where they can make groups. You're basically negotiating your price once again with that buyer. It's also an effective way, and it cuts some costs for the producer as well. Forward contracts, another way of marketing cattle. When the market's really hot, and let's say you have cattle, we're going to talk about this later, but about a grass contract. There's some grass contracts out there for cattle coming off grass in September that guys are willing to agree on a price today because they think the market's going to get higher. These contract offerings are actually pretty good. If you own inventory now and we're planning to grass them, you are definitely looking at a contract. You might net yourself a couple $100s a head. If the market after you sign this contract, if the market does go down and crashes, you get the price that you contracted your cattle for, and you come out smelling like a rose. One of the downsides to it, obviously, is if the market skyrockets and the guy who gave you the contract is right, you only get the price that you were contracted, and all your buddies down the road are getting the market value, and they're laughing at you because they got more money. But that's just the name of the game, and this is basically a contract that we would use on a daily basis for contracting cattle. So some of the terms when you go to do a contract, you need to establish a base weight for what the cattle are supposed to weigh. So let's say you're going to base cattle at 1,000 pounds. They never weigh exactly what they're supposed to weigh. They're always heavier or lighter by a few pounds. The price, we have it on here as negotiable terms. These aren't really negotiable once the contract is written, but before the contract is written, these are the terms you negotiate. So obviously the price, the base weight, the delivery date, weighing conditions, and the price slide, which we'll talk about later, and shorts or cuts, which is cattle that don't fit the contract that you need to take out. Non-negotiable terms is description or of delivery of kind, which is basically if you say that this is the kind of cattle they are, if you're selling number 1 black steers and that's what you write the contract for, you better not ship a bunch of number 2 reds or tan cattle if they have to meet the description. Flesh of the cattle is basically the amount of flesh that they're carrying when they come to a feedlot. If you're a feedlot, you want to put that flesh on. You don't want fat, chubby cattle showing up to your feedlot. That's your job. So the guy who's selling them needs to make sure that he's feeding them accordingly and doesn't get over fat cattle. Brands and checkoff is just something anytime you market cattle you have to pay. It goes to brand inspection and the Saskatchewan and Canadian beef checkoff. And changing price due to market conditions. Like I said before, if once you sign that contract, it doesn't matter what the market does, good or bad. That's the price you're getting. You can't sign a contract, have the market go way up, and tell the guy you want more money. I can tell you it's not going to happen. Deviation from terms, basically these contracts, as far as I'm concerned, they're set in stone. Once you sign that paper, she's a done deal. So you got to deal with the agreement you made at the time you signed the contract. And when you do these contracts, I've always said that if you really think you need the contract, you probably shouldn't do it because you need to make sure you're dealing with someone that you trust and that you know is going to stand behind the contract. The worst thing that can happen is we'll talk about is when contract delivery goes bad. And there's some things that are out of your control. Last year, I had a contract for 900-pound heifers for one of my customers. He threw them out on a pasture where they were basically chased by wolves all summer. The cattle came in 100 pounds light. It was a bad deal. And he had deads. We were short on the contract, and the cattle were way lighter than they were supposed to be. And at the end of the day, everything worked out good. It was stuff that was out of our control. And the reason that I was able to sleep at night is because I knew that the guy that I had sold the cattle to was a good guy, and I knew he was going to understand. And the guy that I bought the cattle from was the same way. If you are dealing with someone that you're leery about and you're worried about what's going to happen if this market goes the wrong way, maybe look at doing a contract with someone else, because we've had times where the market's dropped drastically, and you hear of stories where guys are backing out of contracts, tearing up contracts. Sometimes when the market goes sky high, the guy who you contracted the cattle to buy them from doesn't show up and deliver. These contracts are basically, it's still your word and a handshake deal, and the contracts, I don't know how well they hold up in court. So moral of the story is if you're doing a contract with someone, make sure you trust them. So we're going to do a little scenario here where we're going to pretend that we're going to be buying some cattle, and we're going to background them, and then we're going to put them out to grass and do a contract. So the biggest mistake a lot of people make is they go to town and they buy their cattle, and that's when their marketing strategy starts, is after they buy their cattle. They're like, okay, I got these cattle, and now I'm going to start my marketing plan. And that is not the right attitude. The first thing you need to do is assess what you're going to buy, what you're going to pay for it, what are the current market conditions, what's the supply and demand for the class of cattle I want to buy, and is this a good time to buy or should I just wait? If you're going to go to town to buy or sell, you need to look at the futures market or look at your local auction market's price listing, what cattle are bringing. Do your homework first, and it'll save you from getting surprised at the auction market. Futures markets are going to give you a good indication of the way the market's trending. If the board is red, if cattle futures are red and down for 2 weeks straight, maybe it's not a good time to take your cattle to town. If you see that the futures are rallying, 3-4 days in a row, I can tell you right now that's going to put a lot of pep in the buyer's step, and the market's definitely going to be up on the uptrend. Transportation and weather variables is definitely one of the biggest ones, especially if you are looking at marketing at a live auction. Check the weather forecast, and not just the weather forecast at home. Check the weather where those cattle are likely going to go. In Saskatchewan, probably 90% of our feeder cattle go to southern Alberta. If you're getting ready to take your cattle to town on a Friday and you see that they're supposed to get 2-3 feet of snow in southern Alberta in a big storm, don't take your cattle to town that week, because I can tell you those feedlots are not going to want cattle. They're going to have their hands full, and the market will drop like a rock. So we're going to go through a scenario here, and we're going to look at a contract. And if you look at the bottom of this slide, the contract that was offered to us is for a 1,000-pound steer in the middle of September, and they're going to offer us $1.80 a pound for that 1,000-pound steer in the middle of September. So you need to write this down too, because I forgot to put it on this slide. We are 177 days away from the middle of September. So we need to buy cattle today and own them for 177 days. And these steers over those 177 days will gain 1.7 pounds per day, which is a total of 301 pounds. Our expenses to feed these cattle from today until the grazing season, which is the middle end of May, is going to be at 75 days. It's going to cost us $1.25 per head per day, for a total of $93.75. Drugs, branding, you might want to give them an implant. You want to put brand on your cattle. You might want to give them a couple vaccinations before they go out to grass. It's going to cost you about $15 a head. Your pasture rent, or even if you own the pasture, you still need to pay yourself for your pasture. Guys value it differently, but I would say about $120 per head is about a good overhead on that. And your interest, depending on what you pay for the cattle, let's just call it $35 a head. Just throw a random number out there at you, basically. So those are all your overhead costs. You got offered $180 for a 1,000-pound steer. That's $1,800. We need to decide what we need to go to town and buy. You need to buy a steer, obviously. We need to figure out what weight of steer we need to buy, knowing that over 177 days, they're going to gain 301 pounds. So if you guys want, pause this video and see if you can figure out this for yourself, and I'll come back to you. But basically, I need to know what weight of steer I need to buy today and how much I can pay for it to just have a dead break even and not lose any money, but what's the absolute most I can pay and just break even. So go ahead and pause this and see if you can figure that out, and I'll be right back to you. Okay, here's what I ended up with. Basically, after your dry lot costs, drugs, branding, pasture rent, and your interest subtracted off of your $1,800, what you got offered, leaves you with $1,536. Your 301 pounds that you subtracted, because over the 177-day period, they're going to gain 1.7 pounds, gives you 699 pounds is the weight of animal you need to buy. Now, you don't need to buy exactly 699, but I would say if you're going to go to town, you're going to want to buy between a 650 and 750 weight steer. Average them together, it should weigh about 700 pounds. So at $1,536, you divide that by 699 pounds, that's $2.20 a pound is what your budget is to buy those cattle. I can tell you today, if you went to an auction market, or if I was going to buy you 700-pound steers today, it'd cost you, what did I have written down here? $202. So that's $1,412, and that's going to give you a net profit. If you bought those cattle at $202 today, put all those expenses into them, and had a contract for $1,800, it's going to net you a profit of $124 a head. So that is a good buy. There's a good contract out there, and there's not many instances where you can go to town, buy cattle, and before you even get them home, write up a contract and have them sold for a profit. So this was an interesting one to show you guys. Usually when I'm showing people break-evens for cattle, there's $100 losses in them, and people are wondering why the hell we do this. But that's just the way it goes. But that was an interesting one I wanted to run through you guys. Now, there is another option if you didn't want to just contract those cattle. Well, there's two options really. You could just go to town, buy your 700-pound steers at $202, and just wait the market out and hope by September maybe they're worth $190 or even $2, and you're really raking it in. However, if the market goes down and starts crashing, you're going to start losing money, and that's not much fun. So there is an option where you can kind of get the best of both worlds, and it's called the Western Livestock Price Insurance Program. I think that's what they're still called. They just did a rebranding, but they are still called the Western Livestock Price Insurance Program. So here's a table of the price insurance program. And on the left-hand column, that's your price level. So 190 is at the top, it goes all the way down to 156. Personally, I don't look at anything below the top coverage number. Now we see on the columns going towards the right, we have August, September, October, November. Those are the coverage months. Now we were talking September on our deal earlier, and that at the very top there, you see $6.41. That is what's called the premium. So you have to pay that premium to the insurance company to lock in your coverage. Now that's $6.41 per hundredweight. So we have a 1,000-pound steer, and if you divide that by 100, that's 10 hundredweights, which means you times that 10 hundredweights by $6.41, it's going to be $64.10 is what your premium is going to cost. The number on the left is your price per pound coverage, but it is based off of an 850 weight steer, not a 1,000-pound steer. So during the grass time, I'm going to say that a 1,000-pound steer is probably going to be worth $7 a hundred or 7 cents a pound less than what an 850 weight steer is. So we're going to take that 190, we're going to subtract the $7, and then we're going to also subtract the premium, which is $6.41, which is going to give us a coverage level of $1.76.59 per hundredweight, or $1.76 per pound. That's $1,765 that you could buy that coverage, and that guarantees that that is the least amount that you will receive for those cattle after paying that premium. However, if the market does go up, you capture all of the upside. So you have protection on your downside, but if the market goes up, you can capture all of the upside. I use this program. This is probably the first year I didn't use it in probably 8 or 9 years. Only reason being is the contracts were out there. I liked it at the time, and that's the route I went. But this is a very effective tool for managing your risk. They are currently trying to make some tweaks to make the program a little better and more accurate, which I applaud them for. There has been a few holes in the system that needed improvement, and they are working on that. The Western Livestock Price Insurance Program also has calf coverage. So for producers with calves, that's ultimately what the program was designed for. Basically, there's a table similar to this that you can insure. Like right now, you can insure your calf crop for the 2021 fall. So November, December, and if you basically, what I tell people is if you can insure a calf at or above the cost of production, it's not a bad investment. The premiums are lower for the calves. They're usually like $30, $40 a head. It does add up, but last year when we had packing plants closing during COVID-19, anyone who had calf insurance was really glad they have it because we didn't know what calves were going to be worth last fall. It ended up being not that bad. We got out of it okay, but it sure helps you sleep at night and gives you a sound peace of mind. Here's an interesting slide that I found up. This was out of my dad's presentation that he does to this class. I think this was from about 3 years ago. This is going to give you an idea of what we're dealing with in the cattle market right now. So as you can see, the grass deal looks pretty good. There's some figures in the grass cattle. There's some money to be made. There's not a lot of grass available, and there's going to be a lot less because we're forward contracting canola for $18. And if you have pasture land that's even remotely marginal farmland, it's probably getting ripped up and seeded to canola this year. So this is on the cattle feeding side. This slide, I think, is probably from about 4 or 5 years ago. Maybe it was when Dad made this. If you look up top here, we have a 1,500 pound steer, and the fat price or finished weight price, this is for fat cattle going to the slaughter plant, is $1.40 a pound. So that's $2,100 of available revenue that your fat steer is worth. Your cost of gain, you want to put 800 pounds on this steer, because we're going to look, you see at the bottom, we're going to buy a 700 pound steer. So you need to put on 800 pounds on this animal to get it to 1,500 pounds. At this time, the cost of gain was 75 cents a pound. So it was $600 for that cost of gain to feed. So if you subtract that $600 off your $2,100, you're left with $1,500 to purchase a 700 pound steer. That's $2.14 a pound. Now I just told you, you can go to town today and you can buy a 700 pound steer for $2.02. We put those on grass, those math figures worked. They would obviously work here. However, that cost of gain at 75 cents a pound was probably when barley was about half the price it is now. We're going to go to today where we're going to take that same 1,500 pound steer. The fat price has gone up. It's not $1.40, it's $1.49. So now we've got $2,235 of revenue. Our cost of gain has gone up to $1.20 a pound. That's with interest and everything. I might be not too friendly on the cost of gain, but the way things are going, I'm not going to be friendly on my cost of gain. I'm thinking if it's going up this high, it could go higher. I'm going to play it safe and use $1.20 for my break even. So that's $960 to put that 800 pounds on. It's $360 more than it was the previous year. So you got your $2,235 worth of revenue, subtract your $960 for your cost of gain. You have 1,275 pounds left over to purchase your 700 pound steer. That's $1.82 a pound. And I just told you had to pay $2.02. So that's 20 cents a pound. That is $140 a head. So that's right. People today are buying 700 pound steers and putting them in their feedlot with a negative $140 built into them. I don't know why we do this sometimes. I think this year we have our cow herd in Canada has definitely shrunk over the last few years, and our feedlot capacity has expanded. We don't have much of an export market. The supply is low and the demand is high. I had a cattle feeder tell me once when I was asking him, I was like, how do you buy cattle that look like they're going to lose $150 a head? They're obviously gambling that the market goes up. He says a pen full of cattle might lose money. A pen with no cattle in it definitely loses money. You're paying for your infrastructure. You got bills to pay. These guys want their pens filled. They don't like letting pens sit empty. And that's why you see guys go to town, and these cattle do not make sense right now to feed. There's no figures in anything right now. So I just thought I'd show you guys those two slides to go back to this last one. Things were pretty good. I'm sure when Dad made this slide, he was in a good mood because it looked like he was making money. Then you go to today, and literally every animal you put in a feedlot, it looks like it's destined to lose money. Here's a break even for a heifer. Just wanted to show you guys this. Everyone always says, why are heifers worth less a pound than a steer? They cycle basically once a month, and they don't eat and they don't gain as good. So you can see where, on that previous slide, the cost of gain for a steer was 75 cents. Cost of gain for a heifer is 82 cents. Also, that heifer is not going to get to 1,500 pounds. She's be lucky to get her to 1,400 pounds. She'd have to be the right kind of heifer. So they don't get as big, and they don't convert feed into pounds as efficiently as a steer. That's why heifers are worth less than steers. Basically, that's all I got for you guys today. I hope it was informative. I hope you paid attention. If you didn't, watch this again, because I have heard from some past students that some of this stuff does end up on your final exam. So you might want to watch this again. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for the opportunity, and hopefully see you in person next year.